Welcome to the Cherokee County Appraisal District's PowerPoint presentation for our Board of Directors. We hope the information provided in this presentation will help you have a better understanding about how the Appraisal District is governed and operated. To begin, let's review some important points in the history of Cherokee CAD and appraisal districts in general. Appraisal districts were created by the state legislature in 1979 by what is commonly known as the Pivotal Bill, named after Representative Wayne Pivotal from Orange, Texas. The inception meeting of the first Cherokee County Appraisal District Board of Directors was held in February of 1980 in the county courtroom. W. D. Malden, W. E. Cook, J. M. Boone, Richard Johnson, and George Ross were the first directors in our history. The first item of business conducted by the board was the solicitation of bank depository bids. After 5 months of intervening time in which the directors attended state meetings with others, trying to figure out what an appraisal district was, and if in fact it would be a long-standing agency or a flash in the pan, the board met to interview prospective chief appraiser candidates in July of that year. 3 persons were interviewed by the board: Mrs. Shirley Babb, Mrs. Cordelia Hassel, and Mr. Sid Danner. Mr. Danner was subsequently selected and hired as the first Cherokee County chief appraiser at a meeting later that month with an initial annual salary of $30,000. Mr. Danner previously had been the tax assessor collector for Jacksonville Independent School District. Later, Mrs. Cordelia Hassel was hired by Mr. Danner to be the appraisal district's tax collection supervisor. In September of 1980, the board approved the first appraisal district budget of just under $400,000. The first home of the district was at a building owned by Bob Gregg where the current Joe Ed Anderson real estate office is located. This move was initiated in August of 1980. The first employee of the district was hired by Mr. Danner. Kathy Jones was hired in September of 1980 and continues to serve the district today. In November of the following year, for $140,000, the district purchased the old Rusk Federal Savings and Loan Building for $65,000 down and 4 annual installments. They moved in August of 1982 and are still in that location today. In December of 1981, the board awarded the first contract for outside appraisal services to Pritchard and Abbott to perform oil and gas, utility, and industrial property appraisals. In June of 1982, the district produced the first appraisal roll and appraisal notices. Mr. Danner held several town hall type meetings around the county earlier in the year to try and prepare the taxpayers for market value based appraisals and to educate them on the new process of protesting their values. Tax collections began for the district in 1982 as well. The first budget for collections was just over $20,000 and 3 taxing units were serviced that first year: the City of Rusk, Rusk ISD, and New Summerfield ISD. As the years have passed, more taxing authorities signed on with our tax department. Most recently, the cities of New Summerfield and Jacksonville were added to our list of collection clients in 2008. Flashing forward to the more present time, Mr. Danner retired from the district in July of 2000 after 20 years of service. The board hired J.L. Flowers in May of 2000, and he effectively took office on August 1st and serves to this day in the capacity of chief appraiser. To understand the appraisal district concept, It is important for one to understand the system of property taxation prior to 1980. Each taxing unit could perform their own appraisals, meaning that an owner could see a variety of values on their property amongst the various taxing units. If an owner wished to protest their value, the Board of Equalization was the taxing unit governing board. So the board that set your tax rate was also the board that decided what your value would be under a protest. It was also extremely commonplace across the state for commercial and industrial properties to be valued at market value, while residences and rural land were valued at a fraction of market value. This was one of the biggest factors that led business groups to lobby the legislature for a change in how property taxes were administered in Texas. Appraisal districts were created to centralize this process within each county in Texas. The two overriding principles of the new concept were fair and uniform treatment of all taxpayers and appraisals based on 100% of market value across the board. These two concepts were established within the state constitution by constitutional amendment. Now let's talk for a moment about how the appraisal district is governed. Governance of the appraisal district is set up under an arrangement similar to a corporation. There is a board of directors, and those directors engage a chief executive officer, which in our case is the chief appraiser. Now, in our county, the board is made up of 5 voting members and the county tax assessor collector. The directors serve terms that are 2 years in length with no term limits. All directors go on and go off at the same time, meaning that there are no staggered terms. To be eligible to serve on the board, a person must have been a resident of Cherokee County for at least 2 years prior to taking office. Some folks don't know, but a director can in fact be an elected official. So a school board member, or a city councilman, or even the county judge or a county commissioner could in fact serve as a director. This is allowed because those elected officials are responsible for tax dollars. And since the appraisal district is funded by tax dollars, elected officials should be able to be a director and be responsible for appraisal district tax dollar expenditures. However, there are several restrictions on who can be a director. First, no employee of a taxing unit may be a director. There are several marriage and blood relation restrictions to board service as well. Obviously, a director should not be closely related to a district employee. But relations also extend to persons who perform appraisals for use in protest hearings against tax values, and to persons who are engaged in representing property owners as a tax agent. So if someone related within the specified degrees of relations do either of these activities in Cherokee County, that person would not be able to be a member of the board of directors. A director also cannot be related to a person or have an interest in a party that contracts with the district. They may not have delinquent taxes either unless they have entered into a payment agreement in good standing to pay those delinquent taxes, or if they have had a tax suit abated or deferred by law. If you have a question about degrees of relations or specific situations, you should contact the chief appraiser, the state comptroller, or an attorney. Knowing what directors are and how many there are, The question is, how does a person get to be a director? Directors are elected to office by the participating taxing units using a three-step process in the fall of each odd-numbered year. First, the taxing units pass resolutions nominating up to 5 persons for the ballot. In step 2, these nominations are put in ballot form by the chief appraiser. The names are alphabetically ordered on the ballot, and the ballot is sent back out to the taxing units along with a voting resolution form. Each entity governing body casts their votes at a posted public meeting in step 3 and returns the resolutions to the chief appraiser by December 15th. The chief appraiser then tabulates all votes for the nominees. The top 5 nominees that garner the most votes comprise the new board. This process is governed by the Texas Property Tax Code. A total of 5,000 votes are allocated and divided during this process to each entity based upon their tax levy. This is a copy of the 2012-2013 voting allocation spreadsheet. Each participating taxing unit is listed along with their corresponding total tax levy. Now, a tax levy is the amount of total tax dollars a taxing unit assesses for a particular year. These levies are added together to get a total tax levy assessed for all participating taxing units within the boundaries of Cherokee County. It is important to note that we share some taxing units with other counties. Wells ISD, Rusk ISD, Bullard, Troup, and Carlisle ISDs participate in more than just Cherokee County. Additionally, the cities of Bullard and Troup also lie in more than Cherokee County. For these jurisdictions, only the portion of tax levy that is attributed to the geographic boundaries of Cherokee County is counted. The next step in the spreadsheet is dividing each individual levy by the total levy to reach a percentage. This is basically the share of responsibility the jurisdiction has in the appraisal district. This percentage can also be traced back to the cost share of the appraisal budget. Now, that percentage is then multiplied by 1,000 and then by 5 board seats to reach the number of votes allocated to that entity. Now, a jurisdiction may cast all of their votes for one nominee or divide their votes among several nominees. A copy of this spreadsheet is included with all voting correspondence to the taxing units. We have discussed the 5 elected board positions, but there is also the potential for one additional seat on the board. By law, the county tax assessor collector has a guaranteed seat on the appraisal district board of directors. Keep in mind that the tax assessor collector can be elected in the process discussed in the previous 2 slides, but if they are not, they serve on the board as a non-voting member. Even if they are a non-voting member, there are many things that the county assessor can do on the board. They first must be considered when calculating quorum. They can make and second motions. They can be a board officer or serve on subcommittees. And finally, they have the right to participate in all discussions and debate in both public and closed sessions of the board. There are certain legal restrictions that should be observed by directors. First and foremost, directors are prohibited from doing anything that influences the valuation process or the administration of ad valorem issues. By law, no director can communicate with the chief appraiser about valuation issues directly or indirectly outside of a posted public meeting or a similar public forum. However, another exception to this rule is in legal discussions within a closed meeting with counsel to discuss pending litigation. In that situation, if the chief appraiser's presence is required, he may communicate and the board may communicate about valuation issues, but only as they pertain to the pending litigation. Outside of these exceptions, it is a Class C misdemeanor to discuss value issues with the chief appraiser outside of these exceptions. All of this pertains to the county assessor as well, except that the county assessor is allowed to discuss administrative and value issues as long as they are part of normal conduct of business in handling tax assessment and collections. Now that we know who directors are and what they can't do, we need to focus on what they are supposed to do. There are several statutory duties that the board has. First, they must establish an office and contract for any necessary services and hire the chief appraiser. They also appoint appraisal review board members and provide advice and consent to the chief appraiser in the selection of ag advisory board members. Finally, they make general policies and adopt the biennial reappraisal plan. Let's examine the major duties listed above, starting with contracted services. As mentioned earlier, the first item of business of the board was to engage a banking depository institution. Currently, the district contracts with Texas National for its banking needs. The district maintains checking, safe deposit, and CD accounts at the local branch. The depository contract covers a 2-year period of time, and it is considered in the fall of each odd-numbered year. Appraisal services are currently awarded to Capital Appraisal Group in Austin, Texas. Capital performs all of our oil and gas appraisals, as well as the industrial and utility appraisals in the county. We have been with Capital since 2004, and their quarterly payments are an expensed item. Our software package that allows us to administer tax appraisals and collections is provided by LPS True Automation out of Plano, Texas. The district was the second True Automation client, coming on board in January of 1999. They also host and support our internet presence, including the GIS maps available on the web. Like Capital Appraisal, their quarterly payments are also an expensed line item. Our delinquent collections lawyer is the Linebarger firm. They have a branch office in Tyler at the Cotton Belt building. Linebarger is the only collection firm the district has contracted with since 1982 and is one of several agencies providing delinquent collection services across the state. Their fees are obtained by statute through their collection of delinquent taxes. That means that we do not pay them as a budgeted item. We also contract for legal consultation and representation through the firm of Hargrove and Evans. The principals of this firm are former partners of the Linebarger firm who split off in 2006. All consultation is paid for by Linebarger as a codicil of our delinquent collections contract. Therefore, there is no expense for the district to get a legal opinion. However, if the district requires legal representation in a lawsuit, the district pays for those fees out of the budget. The district annually engages an auditor to conduct an audit of all 3 budgeted departments. Hugh Goodpasture of Jacksonville is the current auditor for the district. Our Our property and casualty insurance is carried through Tosh Insurance Agency of Rusk. Our agent is Don Jones. They also carry our performance bonds as well. Gilbert Baker in Jacksonville is our agent for health insurance through the provider of Blue Cross Blue Shield for major medical. The Texas Municipal League handles both our workers' compensation coverage and the director's errors and omissions policy. Our retirement advisors are Ralph and Patty Fothery, representing Security Benefit. Currently, our janitorial contract is with CL Cleaning Services of Jacksonville. One of the more difficult challenges facing directors is the appointment of Appraisal Review Board members. Commonly referred to as the ARB, this panel is made up of 5 local property owners and is charged with the responsibility of hearing protests about district actions. Commonly, the ARB hears property owner protests. A property owner may protest a long list of actions that they believe are in error. Market value and equality issues are 2 of the most prevalent types of disputes. The ARB also hears protests of taxing units. These protests are called challenges. A taxing unit can challenge only certain aspects of valuation and administration, however. They cannot challenge individual appraisals, for example, but they can question the level of appraisal for a category or neighborhood as a whole. They can also challenge the granting of exemptions or special use appraisals, the exclusion of a property from the tax roll, or the failure of the district to identify the entity as a taxable unit for a property. ARB members serve terms that are 2 years in length, and they have a limit of 3 terms before becoming temporarily ineligible. In order to become eligible after being term limited, an individual must wait 2 full years. The ARB membership is staggered, with 2 members serving on one rotation and 3 on a different rotation. Of curious note, the legislature now requires the board of directors to decide who will hold ARB offices pursuant to Section 6.42 of the Property Tax Code. The directors establish general ARB policies regarding attendance of ARB members, and the board is limited in its oversight ability with regard to the ARB. Directors may only remove an ARB member if they find an ARB member is in violation of certain statutes or the attendance policy. The law is specific in this regard in order to eliminate any improper influence of the directors or taxing units over the ARB process. A little tidbit of ARB history. The first Cherokee County Appraisal Review Board was appointed in January of 1982 and heard 25 protests that first season. The Board of Directors also establishes general policy for the district. Specifically, there are 5 policies that the board is responsible for. The board has established the policy for personnel that work for the district. It covers all facets of human resource topics and was reviewed by legal counsel prior to adoption. The board also has its own policy for how it conducts its business. Contained within the director's policy are specifications on the conduct of meetings, how the board handles taxpayer complaints and media relations, and sections that describe its relationship with the chief appraiser. A short purchasing policy is also part of the policy package. This policy covers how expenditures are handled within the district and includes provisions on who signs the checks and how they are approved. The chief appraiser is evaluated annually. To do this, the board reviews and adopts the guidelines for the chief's performance review prior to conducting the evaluation. Finally, the district has an organizational guide that is approved in part by the board. The guide lists the various job classifications and job descriptions of the district. It also includes salary ranges for each class. These salary ranges are directly controlled and approved by the board. One of the most important tasks that the board does is to develop and approve the annual budgets. The district has three separate budgeted functions: appraisal, collection, and 911 addressing. Each of these budgets are approved and adopted annually in August or September. In general, the flow of work begins with an initial budget developed in May or June. Once the initial budget has been approved by the board, the budgets go out to the various taxing units for their review. Then, in August or September, the chief appraiser sends a notice out to the units and also posts a quarter-page ad in the paper announcing a public hearing on the budgets. Now, this is done 10 days prior to the hearing. At the hearing, the public and jurisdictions may voice their comments about the budgets. Following the hearing, the board may adopt the budgets with or without corrections. The budgets go into effect on January 1st. Another legislative task required is the adoption of a biennial reappraisal plan. The reappraisal plan is a document that notes when and where the district will be conducting field inspections. It also provides information on how the district develops and maintains data and how appraisals are performed. A public hearing is required and notice of the hearing is supplied to the jurisdictions 10 days prior. After the hearing, the board may adopt the plan. This all takes place in the fall of each even-numbered year, and the adopted plan must be submitted to the Comptroller's office by September 15th. Even though appraisal districts are local agencies administering local taxes, there are still some state agencies that provide oversight of the district and its board of directors. The State Comptroller's Office, through their Property Tax Assistance Division, oversee many aspects of district life. They perform two biennial studies on alternating years, the Property Value Study and the Methods and Assistance Program, commonly known as the MAP audit. They also prescribe administrative forms and set agency rule and also act as a statewide repository for ad valorem information. The Attorney General's Office oversees all aspects of the Texas Open Meetings Act and the Public Information Act. They answer questions about these acts and serve to enforce violations. The Board of Directors and the district must operate under the guidelines established by these two acts. The Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation actually oversee individuals who have licenses to appraise, assess, or collect local ad valorem taxes in Texas. They investigate complaints against licensees and enforce penalties and sanctions for violations. Locally, there are also checks and balances in the operation of the board and the chief appraiser. Actions of the board may be overridden by veto resolutions from a majority of the participating taxing jurisdictions. Those resolutions must be filed with the secretary of the board within 15 days of the board action taking place. Directors can also be recalled through a statutory process by the jurisdictions, and as mentioned before, the board is also subject to the Attorney General with regard to open meetings and public information. The Chief Appraiser's authority can also be brought under scrutiny from several different directions. First and most obvious, the Chief Appraiser is subject to sanction by the Board of Directors. The Chief Appraiser serves strictly at the pleasure of the Board. The Chief is also subject to the rulings of the ARB, arbiters in arbitration cases, and the District Court in matters regarding ad valorem issues that have been appealed. Sanctions can also be brought against the Chief Appraiser by the Comptroller's Office, the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, and the Attorney General's Office. As mentioned earlier, the district has three separate and distinct budgeted departments. The Tax Collection Department is responsible for assessing and collecting taxes for almost all taxing jurisdictions in Cherokee County except for the county itself. This function is not required by statute. The Collections Department is supported by the taxing units it collects for. The Appraisal Department determines ad valorem values and administers local taxes according to the Property Tax Code. All units within the boundaries of Cherokee County are required by law to use the district values. Funding is allocated in the same fashion as discussed in allocating director votes in earlier slides. The 911 Addressing Department assigns and maintains all emergency addresses in Cherokee County outside of the city of Jacksonville. This function is not required by law, and the budgeted department is supported by contributions from those jurisdictions that the appraisal district addresses for. Thank you for taking the time to review our presentation for the Board of Directors. We appreciate so much the job that you do for the district and for our communities here in Cherokee County.